Good morning, everyone. My name's Kieran Taylor. I'm with Broadcom, formerly CA Technologies, and as mentioned, I lead AI Ops, or Artificial Intelligence for IT Operations Solutions at Broadcom. Very excited to have all of you here, and even more excited to be joined with these four gentlemen. We've got a great panel this morning. As Dr. Samueli just described, modernization is a huge focus at Broadcom. It's a huge focus for you as well. And when we look at modernization, top of the list is automation and AI, or artificial intelligence. In fact, if you look at the use cases for artificial intelligence across industries, top of the list is going to be IT. It's a low-hanging fruit for artificial intelligence. And it's not about eliminating jobs. It's not about replacing workers. Rather, it's about streamlining your processes and getting a more efficient IT operations function within your agencies. Ideally, through that process, you're now able to refocus your teams on higher value tasks. That's the name of the game. So very excited to be joined by these four panelists, and they're on the front lines of implementing automation and understanding what challenges are ahead and also what successes can be achieved. So before we get into some of the questions that I prepared, I want to go first with you, Dr. Tibbits. If you could just tell us a little bit about your role at Veterans Affairs, and in particular, if there are any projects that touch automation right now, by means of introduction, share those.
Okay, well, just to be brief, Paul Tibbits, I'm a physician by background. I'm standing up the Office of Technical Integration to look at the interaction, I guess I can say, across our major programs, supply chain transformation, financial management transformation, healthcare, et cetera. I believe we're learning what integration means, by the way, so if any of you have ideas on how to manage in that multidimensional space, we'd be all ears. I love market research, so feel free to come in and talk to me.
Awesome. Ken?
Yeah, my name is Ken Rogers. As Deputy CIO for Business Management Planning, I manage a $3 billion IT portfolio for the department. It's about a third of that is a direct portfolio under the CIO, and 2/3 of that happen decentrally across the Department of State. And we operate in 185 countries, and so we're constantly looking at how do we leverage technology to effectively and efficiently execute the mission of the organization, our diplomatic mission. One of the questions we're asking, or a question we ask every day, is in 2030 or 2040, what does a diplomat look like traveling around the globe? How do they access their data? How are they equipped and enabled to do that mission effectively? And how do we provide that to our customers in a secure and accessible way? So look forward to chatting some more.
Hi, my name's Chip Copper. I work for, well, technically my title is Research and Development, but actually it should be Research and Development and Development. And the reason for that is because the first research has to do with you all. That I have the opportunity, I see a lot of familiar faces that are out here. I have the opportunity to come out and talk to y'all to find out what is it that you're trying to solve, because I think that us developing technology without a purpose is just pointless. And I think that that would echo all the way up through the organization. So once I've done that research, I can bring it back and then figure out, now that we know what the problems are and we know how to describe them in a very concise way, how do we solve that problem? What technology do we, Broadcom, have that we can bring to bear against that particular problem? The first development then is, how do we take that and package that in such a way that's consumable by you? How can we give this to you? You look at this and say, yeah, that's something that would probably solve this problem. And then, of course, the second development is, how do we carry that through to see you develop the solution for the problem that I discovered all the way back at the very first research? It's a fascinating problem, and I've enjoyed over the years working with many of you and trying to figure out what it is that we can do to make your lives better.
And I'm Jeff Henry. I run our strategy, portfolio, product management, as well as our design group at Broadcom, specifically in the Mainframe division. But I want to make sure that something's clear, and this goes back to some of the questions with the previous speaker. Our focus on our solution and our investments is in the flexibility for you all. So the only way I can do my job is by meeting you all, establishing those relationships, bringing you into our agile development process. And that's not a platform base. Although we organize, broken out into ES and Mainframe, our investment and our solution focus is hybrid IT. It's cross-platform. So you hear a lot of what we're doing in the breakouts is how we're investing to make sure you have the flexibility to leverage it anywhere you want, whatever platform you want. So some of the questions that came up earlier, if I can help in a breakout or if we can follow up later, love to run through those roadmaps. In the breakout we have around the mainframe later today, I'm going to talk about that balanced investment because what you've already purchased from us, from a capability, from a product, is absolutely critical that we continue to innovate and drive new capabilities to you. So you'll see that balanced approach to our roadmaps, but would love to have the opportunity to follow up after this as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, gentlemen. So let's start with some questions around automation. And Dr. Tibbits, I'll start with you. We got to share a cup of coffee this morning and talk a little bit about a lot of what's going on at Veterans Affairs, and it's a big charter in your Office of Technical Integration. But specific to automation, what are some of the projects that you're working on right now? And as you look at this move to digitize some of your processes, what's the most obvious thing to go after?
Well, let me start on what we're not working on first and then go to your question. Right. So when we were preparing for this, part of what we were asked to talk about was artificial intelligence. And I think your chairman mentioned that this morning already, and you can't be in an IT conversation for 2 nanoseconds without someone bringing up AI. What I would offer to the audience is for decisions that matter, AI is nowhere near ready. And I found a nice graphic on the internet, therefore it must be true, about, I don't know, a year ago. It's sort of a mind map view of machine learning, right? And if you look around the outside of that mind map, there are probably 30 different statistical methods, regression, Bayes, blah, 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 on and on and on. And I would say it's very difficult for, certainly in my career, to find anyone who's expert in any one of those. Now they're all bundled up in a machine. You put a massive amount of data in and an answer comes out. An answer will come out. The question is, what good is that answer? What's the predictive value for the future? I would contend that for simple problems, I ordered a Coleman lantern last week, and so therefore this week I get a bunch of advertisements for sleeping bags. Fine, I guess it worked, right? But when I'm trying to create a differential diagnosis list for a patient, I'll get a list, but what's the value of that list? How are we going to go about validating AI for problems and decisions that matter? I would contend we're nowhere near ready for it, so I'd offer that to all of you as a challenge. Figure out even how to go about doing that validation. Anyway, what we're working on, health IT transformation. We're replacing our entire electronic health record. As you all probably know, 30 years ago, VA essentially invented the electronic health record for the world. We're now in the process of replacing that, largely for maintenance reasons and configuration management, a bunch of other disciplinary things underneath the way we've managed the code. Supply chain transformation, we're in the middle of that right now. Also financial management business transformation, we're in the middle of that right now. From a technical integration perspective, my job is to make sure, the fourth one I'll mention is all the processes to purchase care for veterans who need care, where that care has to take place outside of the VA. The referral and authorization process and whatnot. Shorthand for that is Mission Act. So from a mainstream perspective, our job in the Office of Technical Integration is to look at the interplay of all 4 of those things. And so if you all can think about and help us think through, again, the dimensions of how those things could connect. Obviously data flows, obviously sequencing, funding in the proper fiscal year, making sure all the components are properly funded, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd say another one in general terms across all that is data management. And how does enterprise data management, how should enterprise data management be handled from the perspective of integrating major programs of that nature? Lastly, I guess I'll close out and relinquish the microphone. I'm impressed with your statements here. Your bumper sticker here, transform, secure, and simplify. It's a great message. I would suggest all in IT industry, Broadcom perhaps, because I know you all are going through this vertical integration process, climbing up the stack, getting closer and closer to the human brain. I would say you might want to think about, anybody in the industry, a fourth element to your bumper sticker there, and that's humanize. So transform, secure, simplify, and humanize. When you want to understand what the problem is, I would suggest if you go talk to leaders, you're not sure you're going to walk out the room with an understanding of the real problem. Because you got filter upon filter upon filter up to the leader, right? Until you and IT industry are using empathetic observation to go look at a real human being trying to solve a real problem, I'm not sure you know what the problem is. And I'm not sure we know what the problem is. So I'd add humanize and design thinking, human-centered design, that bucket of stuff.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Doctor. Ken, I actually heard you on the radio the other day talking about some modernization at State Department, in particular rolling out IT as a service. I'm curious, does automation play a role in that rollout?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump on the AI bandwagon. Right. So they say garbage in, garbage out. So with AI and machine learning, we get the garbage out faster. So data is a big initiative that we have that I'll talk about. But real quick, we're shifting from buy, build, and maintain to a consumption model of services. This is a fundamental paradigm shift where I need to take the expertise, that engineering and technical expertise, and merge it with an acquisition process that is somewhat challenging in order to buy services primarily in the cloud and leverage that capability. I'll talk about how that's affecting our organization. So in terms of the modernization we're doing as we move into this, one of the key pieces of this is to build a multi-cloud hybrid ecosystem, multi-platform hybrid cloud ecosystem, where we can start moving the modernization of some of our key mission systems into that environment. It's really a shift from cloud first to smart cloud. We have done cloud first. We've moved a lot of stuff, a lot of our systems out, or processes or requirements into that environment, but we haven't done that in a really centralized, integrated way. And so that's a new push that we're driving to. A big piece of that now, State Department. I've worked at a couple federal agencies. State Department is really good with major systems that do. We have one HR system, we have one financial system, we have one acquisition system. But the challenge we've had as those systems have grown up over the last 20 years in their bureaus is they're siloed and the data is not accessible across all those environments. So a big piece of our modernization strategy is to attend to the data. And I think that's where we can start leveraging AI and machine learning if we really understand what we're doing. And a migration from an on-prem environment or a primarily on-prem environment to a cloud environment allows us to look at what are we doing with the data? How do we know where it is in the cloud? Is it interoperable? Is it accessible? So we're focusing on a data strategy and data architecture as we migrate to the cloud, so that we're able to leverage that in our decision making going forward. And then in terms of the impact on business, I think the big challenge when you go down this path is we're really taking a workforce of engineers that have been working at that infrastructure stack, and they no longer need to do it. Mm-hmm. Our service providers are actually providing that capability for us, of course, if we write the contract right, in the right way, and a little nuance there. But in terms of my workforce and my organization, whether it's we're 60% contract and 40% fed, and that's a worldwide set of individuals who work there, but I'm moving. The requirement for my people is to move up the stack to that SaaS layer and engage with the customer to understand their business requirement so we can execute that mission. So there needs to be an understanding of that infrastructure and where it sits. There needs to be an understanding of the core competencies of various platforms that are there, and then an ability to walk and chew gum at the same time, know that technology in the back of the head, but engage with a customer with design thinking and understand their problem. What are you trying to solve? How can we meet that business need? And then how can we leverage the technology in the right way? So huge shift in skills, in mix. I anticipate the 60-40 split to reverse over the next 5 years, and I expect the on-prem workforce to shrink significantly over the next 3 to 5 years because we're purchasing stuff as a solution, as a service. Now, a key data point is I'm moving from on-prem Microsoft, my O365 environment, as I move that into the cloud, I'm literally getting rid of 200-300 Exchange servers across the globe and the support that needs to do that because I'm buying that as a service. So that's just a good example. So right now we're focusing on building out a new infrastructure so then we can focus on our electronic medical record system. How do we bring that into that cloud environment? How do we upgrade our consular systems so that we can do passports and visas more effectively, meeting the needs of our customers? So we've got a number of large investments that are queuing up to modernize as we do this shift. Again, it's a hybrid cloud environment, so there will be high-value assets that are on-prem as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the whole world is indeed hybrid. And Dr. Tibbits, this morning, you described it as having a foot in one canoe and another canoe, right? That's just the world that we live in. Does automation and AI help in that hybrid world? Or how do you see it playing a role when you've got a foot in two canoes, so to speak?
First, I don't know, people, process, and technology. So the people problem, I think you described it very well, upskilling, but us as really IT consumers, in a sense, the VA, many federal agencies, we can't hire fast enough and we can't train fast enough. So our human resource management strategy cannot just be a 1950 strategy of how do we hire and how do we retain. That will not work. Right, because we cannot train our way out of this problem. Our human resource management workforce strategy has now actually got to include contracting. There is no other way we're going to get the agile pivot kind of thing. I guess I'll mention with Gartner, which we in VA use a lot. We've had contracts with them for many years. We depend on a lot of their recommendations and whatnot. Years ago, they used to forecast, they still do forecast the next technology, but they used to use as a headline the next sort of array of stuff. And in 2013, it was the nexus of forces, cloud, mobile, big data, and some fourth thing. Anyway, the nexus of forces. Well, they soon realized the cycle time on the next thing is getting so short that now they don't advertise as a bumper sticker the next series of technologies. They just got rid of all that and said the next big bumper sticker is continuous next. It's just continuous next, right? So how to do that pivot when we have the legacy situations we're in is a problem. But they're in that future canoe. They're things we know enough about now. Looking forward, I guess, looking backwards a year and forward a year. I don't know that we can do much better than that. But application programmer interfaces, right? APIs, the economy of APIs. How do you catalog APIs? How do you create a business structure, a business vision, and relate that business vision to which APIs you need, and then figure out how do you publicize them, resources included, how do you create a catalog of them, blah, blah, blah. But that's got to be driven by a business vision on top. So I'd say APIs is a big piece of that. For those instances where we do a lot of repetitive things, I would say rather than AI, if we're doing a lot of repetitive things, focus on robotic process automation.
RPA,
Where we take a 30-minute process and reduce it to 3 seconds. I mean, for gosh sakes, I think RPA is ready now where suitable. Big data, sure, garbage in, garbage out kind of problem, right? Everybody wants dashboards, everybody wants analytics. I would say, but those analytics are never going to become any good unless they're directly derived from the transactions to conduct your business. So if you're feeding your data warehouse from something other than your transactions, it's a big problem. Because your upstream source will never be correct.
Excellent. Thank you, Doctor. Jeff, you've got mainframe in your title, but that really means that you have to touch everything. I mean, when I think of hybrid, if you're working with mainframe technologies, that means that you're involved with everything. You need to touch everything. Can you talk a little bit about the role of automation in a hybrid world where I've got on-prem and then public as well?
Sure. I mean, one of the things about being in the mainframe group is it's always been hybrid. I mean, I don't know anybody that goes up to their ATM and sticks their card into this big box. And this big box has continuously transformed over the years. I mean, we like to use a lot of car analogies because our GM's a big car geek. I mean, if you look at the Corvette, if you look at the Mustang, none of these are the ones from the 1950s, right? So it's continuously evolved, it's continuously innovated. But it's only as good as how it plays into the rest of the hybrid IT environment. So when you're looking at automation, I completely agree, garbage in, garbage out, the nirvana of the self-driving car, again, car analogy. This is all, where someday we want to be able to drive towards that vision, but how do you break it down into those incremental steps? And when you look at those incremental steps, you got to be able to start with how do you transform the way you've been doing things in the past, the way we've been doing things in the past, and get out of our silos. The mainframe doesn't stand alone, cloud doesn't stand alone, distributed doesn't stand alone, application A doesn't stand alone. I mean, we slice and dice these silos all the time. So how do you get to the point where you can break it down and collaborate around those services that are being used? So an example we use, because it's just simple for everybody to grasp, and it's not a car analogy, is if I think about like Google Maps. You have a use case, and this is from working in those design thinking type work with you all that we want to continuously do. But you have a use case that says, I need to get from point A to point B. And if I pull up Waze, it's going to use a set of microservices to be able to tell me that if there's construction, how do I automate the reroute to get me around it? That is a completely valid use case and one that you have to have, the software in that hybrid environment to be able to handle from the mobile the whole way back to where it's getting that data, which often resides on a mainframe. I mean, 2/3 or more of the world's transactional workload data still sits on a mainframe, so we need to pay attention to it. But then you also have the use case that says, there are hundreds and thousands of people coming in for my, sporting event last night, hockey event. Maybe that's a sore subject. I'm from Raleigh, so. So you have thousands of people coming in, and from a city planner standpoint, you need to be able to look at it and say, hey, if the water main breaks up the street, how do I move thousands of people? How do I move those transactional volumes? Same microservices being used, but a completely different use case. So the people aspect, bringing in who are those teams responsible. The person managing the mainframe is thinking about that city planning. The person managing, say, a transactional trace from your mobile application the whole way to the back end and back, if something slows down, how do I deal? Different use case. So that's a couple of examples. What I'm really most interested in is getting to you all on what your specific business problem is. It was a great setup with the whole design thinking conversation, because that's the third piece of my group, is the design group. And this isn't about how do I make a pretty UI. Yes, we need to modernize what we've done around green screens in the past, and there's a lot of investment there. But it's really about what's your problem? How do we make sure that we're iterating the right way? I mean, garbage in, garbage out fits for agile development too. If I don't start with the right problem, if I don't focus on the right customer feedback along the way, I end up with garbage product.
Dr. Copper, you've got the ideal name for a silicon integration company like Broadcom. I noticed as we walked into the room, you were stopped several times. So you've worked with a lot of the folks in the audience here. You've got a lot of frontline experience. What are you seeing as some opportunities for automation within public sector, within some of these agencies?
So I think you could break that down into 3 different tiers. The first thing is that we're talking about lofty things here. We're talking about machine learning and AI. And some of you, quite frankly, when I talk to you, your discussions and we're along the line of, can I just find out where a machine is located? Or can I just track down a particular thing? That the problems that you're trying to solve, I'm not going to say that they're not difficult, but they're big. And I think that we can see automation really emerging in 3 different areas. The first thing is in the mundane. That there's some things that we're doing every single time, all the same way that you were describing the automatic processes that could be rolled out. But the problem is we have to understand how to do those mundane things, we have to understand how to do them well, and we have to make that process be repeatable. That's what automation has done for some people. You don't do automation in the dark. You don't. One of the first things that you do, you were talking about humanizing earlier. When we're trying to automate something, you don't start by saying, let's throw technology at it. You start by sitting down with the expert, and this is where AI comes in. You sit down with the expert and you ask them, how do you do this? And how do you do it well? And then you try to automate that process so that now, instead of having one expert that has to do one thing at a time, you have 20 experts to make sure that the expert can do them 20 at a time. Now, how do we address the problem that you mentioned earlier? That I don't know if I'd trust machine learning to do something like this. Well, it turns out I have a car that has a dashboard on it. And one of the things on this dashboard is it tells me when something's wrong with one of my tires. This thing lights up, right? And then I have to get out and look like an idiot. I'm kicking tires, and what's going on? Why is the car telling me something's wrong, or car's telling me something's wrong with one of the tires? Sometimes nothing's wrong with the tires, and I just have to go in and I have to teach the car something wasn't wrong here. But there are other times that I'll come back and I'll find out that there was one tire that was low. Now, we don't think of that as being AI. But the AI that we're providing there doesn't necessarily have to be driving the process. It can be a consultant. So that consultant knew enough, and I would argue this is where we are with machine learning right now, that there's a lot of things I would trust machine learning to do. There's a lot of things I wouldn't trust it to do yet. One of the things that we find a lot of our customers doing it is machine learning to advise, to have that light that comes on that says something's wrong. I'm not going to tell you how to solve the problem. That's where the humans come in. We still have a role, right? But what it is going to do is it's going to say things aren't looking like we're seeing. So that brings up the second piece. The second piece is getting the analytics, from the infrastructure so that you don't have garbage coming in. So that I can go out and instead of saying, I'm just going to dump every piece of data from every piece of telemetry that I have, instead of that, how do I go through and how do I filter it and how do I have expert systems that I'll trust at least this far to filter out the noise so that I can remove data that falls outside of the nominal values and so that I can boil things down so that when the expert spends their time on it, they're going to be doing the things that matter because they've got the information. And then the last thing is just at scale, as I mentioned earlier. And that is that now how can I take these things that I've learned? How can I have these trouble lights looking at a lot of different things? And where I need the expertise, I can apply it in very specific situations. Mm-hmm. So it's the mundane. It's applying the expertise to solve a very specific problem once I know what that problem is, and then finally applying that at scale. That's where I see the biggest gains of automation now.
And ultimately, you've got a better signal-to-noise ratio.
Well,
that's right.
Well, hopefully, if one can identify what is signal and what is noise. I had a conversation with an AI group when they said, well, the bias, blah, blah, blah. I said, wait a minute, stop. Let me ask a first grade question. What's bias? Well, we get a result we don't want. I said, no, I don't think so. And then, well, the clinical trial, this clinical trial only had men in it, so therefore women were excluded, and therefore the results are biased. I said, really? So why don't you just use the clinical trial results for men? Well, then if you won't be misapplying it. I mean, so tell me again, what's bias? But anyway, I want to go back to, particularly when you're just putting buckets of data into something, all the right stuff and the wrong stuff all goes in there, right? So anyway, so I want to go to the light, the trouble light, right? First of all, fee-for-service doctors would love you, right? Because we in fee-for-service are wonderful at turning on that light day in and day out, so we sell you some solution, right? Whether you need it or not, we just turn that light on, boy, and it flashes. So. Anyway, I want to go to infrastructure, though, for a minute. And the business case I talked about before, the cascade down from what's the real problem, what's the business need, down to the APIs, whatever it is, all the way down to this server in the basement keeps locking up, and we need to fix that server. Well, the problem we have with technical debt is right now we treat all technical debt as equal, and the problem is it's not. Mm-hmm. So trying to figure out what exactly from a business and mission perspective is that server doing. And is it that, do I need to fix that server today? Mm-hmm. Or can I actually leave it locked up for the next year? Or it's out of warranty or whatever. Who cares? So I would say without a business model to cascade down, and for those of you who are familiar with NIST and the risk management framework, even though that's a security use case for risk, if you look at risk management framework, the mapping of infrastructure to capabilities to mission, there's a whole lot of other use cases for that information other than security. So I'd suggest those of you who are using RMF might look for other uses of it, also your resource allocation, a whole bunch of other things. But I would contend without that business case layer on top, mm-hmm. we don't know what infrastructure to fix. Right,
and then you're chasing alarms that may or may not impact a service, a business service. And does that business service even matter? Is that an important business service?
Are all alarms created equal? I mean, you go on with the same question, right?
Ken, what do you think? Oh, sorry, Chip, go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, does the human exist that can solve that problem?
Yes. I'd ask you a second question, though. Does the human exist who wants to solve that problem? It's clearly solvable by humans. Yes, you can do it on the back of a cocktail napkin if you do all those traces.
Then the
use RMF. I mean, it's a tool, and you can put it on an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, sure.
So the thing I would offer to you is that human expert that you've identified needs to sit down with those AI engineers and those machine learning people and don't let either of them go in a separate direction. Because so often the people, I used to work for a financial industry, and one of the things that they tried to figure out is when do you charge interest? And what we found out is that if we loaned you the money, we charged on holidays, and if we owed you interest, we didn't charge you on holidays. The way we found that out wasn't by talking to the loan experts. The way that we found that out was by going down and talking to the engineers and say, how did you implement this? Because they had to go in and look at code. That's the wrong way to do it. And so the importance is to make those experts available to the automators to make sure that that human intelligence that you've identified can be reflected in the automation that's coming out of it. It's a key piece.
I'm going to go back to the security issue, and one of the areas we're looking at machine learning and AI is how do we better manage the threat that's out there. And there's an extraordinary amount of data, metadata, tagging data that are flowing through. Until we teach the machines what's normal on Monday, it's hard to get what is abnormal on Monday. And can we get our machines to tell us, hey, you have these anomalies, and these anomalies is, I'm not focusing on the doctor trying to make a decision there, but I'm focusing on the significant threat that we have on our data and systems every month, and knowing what's normal and knowing what's an anomaly, and using a risk framework, which ones matter the most. So not every threat to my systems are equal, and I need to understand which ones are high threat that need to be mitigated immediately, and which ones can have a longer threat life. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but we have a certain amount of resources to address our cybersecurity needs, and we need to have a way of using those resources on the highest, biggest impact threats of our organization, and we need to have a way of looking at the mass amounts of data that we get on our global infrastructure. And so that's a key area that we're looking to leverage that machine learning and make our resources go further in addressing real problems.
It's interesting, the three of you are kind of circling around people and process. The technology is the technology. We're not inventing new math. The algorithms exist, right? No one's coming up with new math, but it's really, how do I bring humans into the process? How do I make them involved, define what the business service is, so we're not just chasing alarms for a server restart, that sort of thing. What are you guys doing from a people and process standpoint? Are you seeing that your IT leaders are now connected more with the business than they were before?
Well, so let me tell you about our ERP install. So that's my shorthand here, right? Because I'm in an engineering group. But the name of the program has no computer in it. It's Financial Management Business Transformation, right? There's no word system or something in the program. And the reason is, the objective is to implement the federal best practices in finance and acquisition across the department. Now, it so happens to do that, yes, we need a new ERP, all right? But the ERP is not the end game. Right. We could install the ERP and still fail because people don't learn what the best practices are, implement the best practices in finance and acquisition. To that end, we have front-loaded that program would, I'd say, maybe approaching 2 years of business process reengineering with hundreds of end users to teach them, and at the same time configure the COTS. It's an unmodified COTS product, by the way. It's CGI federal momentum, but to configure the COTS product, but at the same time teach those hundreds of end users what those federal best practices are, right? I'd say 1.5 years to 2 years, hundreds of end users on the front end. So I would say, I think safely, in my 13 years at the VA, that's the first program I've seen where we put that much energy into business process reengineering on the front end of a program, and the name of the program does not include the word computer. Yeah, right.
So in my many years of doing this, I've seen hundreds, maybe thousands of times where, using the fire department analogy, the call comes in, they're down the pole, they're in their gear, they're out the truck, they're across town, they get there, ladders up, hoses pulled, and they find the ladders against the wrong building. How many times does that happen in IT? What problem are we trying to solve? Do our end users even understand what that is? Can they articulate it? And so it is really getting into the day in the life of a GSO operate in an embassy overseas, what do they do? How do they work? And then how do I extract that and then build a business process re-engineer that so I'm leveraging technology on an optimized process rather than gold plating a 20 or 30 year cow path that we've grown comfortable to have. So it's critical that we understand the core business requirement, that we re-engineer where necessary to create the efficiencies. Oftentimes the technology, the automation, doesn't create any efficiency. It's brand A, brand B. It's a new way of doing the same thing. So I call that, modernizing in a non-modernized way. It's rear view mirror thinking rather than really taking the efficiencies are gained with understanding the problem and re-engineering that. And from there, understanding where and how I'm going to leverage the technology, then to automate that. And it's the challenge is huge because re-engineering is a code word for change. And when if you go into any group and say, hey, we're here to help you change, you've lost your audience. But the reality is we are going to business organizations and we're trying to help them rethink what they do. And you have those that know absolutely they need to do something because what currently is being done is broken. And there's others that are in those organizations and, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And let me just continue to do the same thing that I have. So you got to move up that stack and engage with the people and identify the process changes.
Hey, Jeff, in your role, leading strategy, what changes do you see Broadcom making in order to help agencies on this mission to modernize and, in particular, automate some of these processes?
Yeah, so the first and foremost piece is making sure that we have that relationship when we get out with you all. I mean, you heard about the Broadcom business model being different than what we were doing with CA. We're not chasing all those new logos. We're focusing on the relationship and the business problems you all have. The second piece is really, so what do I do with that? So we talked about there being you're not going to throw 1950s solutions at it where you just hire more people. We have a skills issue, whether that's a maturing skill, whether that's a low number of skills, whatever the case may be, we need to do things smarter. We have a tremendous amount of data. That can be an opportunity or that can be an anchor. If you don't know what to do with the data, if you're not actually correlating it and making it all useful to help teams collaborate together, it becomes an anchor. And then how do you automate off of it? You're not going to jump from 0 automation to 100% automation or to utopia using AI overnight. I mean, when I use back to the self-driven car analogy, 5 years ago, if somebody would have said, yeah, just put your kids in that self-driven car and they'll take them off to school. I mean, nobody would take that risk. Nobody would believe that that was secure. There's no way I'd do it today. But I would, and I have started using cruise control. I do use the backup camera. I do use the lane assist. I have been incrementally driving in that way. So our focus and what Broadcom's trying to do with this is, look, lots of people out there can throw you tools to do AI, machine learning, analytics, you name it, whatever buzzword you want to talk about. We're trying to figure out how do we bring it within our own solutions to handle that skill shortage so that you can find those problems quicker or avoid those problems through some automation because we've learned from the past. One of the easiest stepwise approaches was simply, as you talked about, with anomaly detection. It's if I know what Monday typically looks like, I can tell you if something is abnormal. And instead of maintaining some very brittle infrastructure integrations or static thresholds, you can do it dynamically. But the only way to do that isn't pushing technology at you and see whether you like it. It's with you. So when we brought out our CA operational intelligence product solution area 3 years ago, we didn't just GA it based off of these algorithms that we thought was cool from an anomaly detection standpoint. We went and worked with customers. We took your data, we dumped it into the algorithms to see, could it learn? Was it useful? Did it give too many false alerts? So easily 6 months beforehand, we were doing playbacks. Well, one of the ones we did with the big bank that I won't name, it came in and said, okay, we had an outage last week. Show us what you can do. Within 5 minutes, we were able to actually show them where the problem was. And it was just I see what normal looks like. This thing is way above normal. It doesn't take a specialist to see that this thing is out of bounds. Now, is that actually a problem? Well, you need expertise for that. But it points in the direction of where to go look. What they really thought was interesting is they looked down at the timestamp on the ribbon. It was 2 hours before anybody ever called. So we were doing a playback like it was real time. But looking back, last week when they had the problem, it was 5 hours before they had any idea where the problem was. Now, that's just the first step. That's anomaly detection. The second step we started saying is, well, we have all this data from all these different places. It's not just on the mainframe. It's in the cloud. It's in the application. It's those business SLAs. How do you bring all that information together and say, hey, the last 12 times when A plus B plus C happened, the system went down, or performance was degraded, or whatever pattern showed up? Well, how do we get real specialists looking at those patterns to be able to say, well, if we keep seeing this happen, can we automate something so when we see A and B next time, we know we have a 70% chance based off of the data that C is going to happen and something bad.
Yep.
So let's just automate the simple stuff and get it out of the way.
Fix the problem before you even have it.
So those are some of the easy places that we're starting, but completely agree it's a stepwise journey, and we need to do it with you.
So unfortunately, we're up against our time limit. I just got the flag. But the great thing about the way that today is set up, these gentlemen will be available during breaks, so the conversation doesn't stop here. Please engage with them following this session. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your time. It was really entertaining and a great discussion. Please join me in thanking them.